Hello, I'm Kads, and welcome back to the free-to-play review. So today's topic is going to be the latest iteration of the Hero's Path, specifically the Path of the Lost. And yes, it is no secret that I'm definitely excited for this one because we have a guaranteed champion event for Balar the Lost, which of course is the third full Poison Exploder champion added to the game. And for those of you who are fans of me or my channel, you know that the Poison Exploder is #1 on my non-Void Legendary list. So very excited about this, but nonetheless, let's talk about the overall path in and of itself. Now the downside is that it has a Dungeon Divers element, which as we all know, at least for those who've watched me many times or probably even other content creators, Dungeon Divers as far as getting points in Hero's Path, Decks of Fate, stuff like that is basically negligible. Sure, you might get a couple thousand here over the course of the days, but it's really not going to amount to much. So predominantly this is going to be a summon rush, meaning that the primary mode of gaining points will be of course pulling shards. So if we look at the info tab here, you can see that Sacreds will get you 4,500 per, Primals 1,800 per, Void 750, Ancient Shards 300, Mystery Shards down at 3 behind my head there, and then you can see the table for the Dungeon Divers elements, but again that's somewhat negligible. So predominantly, and that's what we'll focus on today, is going to be the equivalent shard cost for getting the various rewards. And speaking of those rewards, we can kind of see it's a pretty darn straightforward path. You have the left hand side, the right hand side, and then you have the center part, and the center part is where most of the goodies are, but there's also some stuff below near the bottom. You don't start with the key, unfortunately, so if you do want to get any of the good-ish stuff here, the keys are, well, there's one key on the right hand side, there's one key on the left hand side, so you have to go down either one of the sides and then come back through the center to get down towards here. But there is also notable, there's mythical tomes down here, so you don't have to care about getting, you'll go through the key regardless, but you don't have to care about using the key if you just want the mythical tome. And most notably here, you have 100 mythical fragments up for grabs, which we'll come back to a little bit later. So in terms of kind of going from like the cheapest to the most expensive option here, the first thing would be just getting yourself one legendary tome. So that's either the left hand or the right hand side of the center path, meaning that you'll need to come down specifically the right hand side path because that is slightly cheaper to get the key. You can see here it's after the 9,000. They're basically equivalent on left and the right hand side up until that point, but this key is up here and this key is down here, so you'd have to pay an extra 750 points to get the second key. So going down the right hand side is the most optimal way to get the first key for the cheapest price. And then you'd come back down the center path, open it up, and come down either the left or the right hand side to get yourself the legendary tome, and that would cost you a grand total of 29,750 points. The next step up would be just going for a mythical tome, meaning that you're bypassing everything here in the center. You still have to come down either the left hand or the right hand side. In this case, because you don't really care about using the key, you can go down either side depending on which rewards you prefer, but regardless, you come down either side, you get the 20,000 points for the mythical tome, and that will cost you a grand total of 45,250 points. As you'd expect, if you instead wanted to go for the entirety of the mythical fragments, you just add 10,000 to that. Of course, you're not going to get the mythical tome, but you'd have access to it if you did want to go for it after the fact, and that would cost you a grand total of 55,250 points. And then we're starting to focus once again on the center path here, so you're still going to have to come down and get one of the keys if you want either the champion himself here on the left hand side or his 5-star perfect soul on the right hand side. Now obviously the utility of the soul really only applies if you have the champion, so you probably do want to get the champion if you don't have him, but if you do happen to have him already, then you could spend your resources on going for the soul just to bank yourself a 5-star soul, or both if you really need to blow up your account for it. But we'll come back to my plan later on. But so if for starters, if you wanted to get the soul, again, reminder that the right hand side is cheaper for getting just one key, and so we do that, come down the center path, you basically come through the legendary tome that we looked at before, 50,000 points for a grand total of 79,750 points for the 5-star perfect soul. And as you'd expect, if you instead came down the left hand side for the same amount of cost, you'd add 10,000 to that for a grand total of 89,750 points to get the champion himself. Now what does all this mean? Of course, we just threw a bunch of numbers at you. Let's hop over to the spreadsheet, which will be linked in the description box down below if you'd like to check out a copy of this for yourself. But just a quick run through, we do have the Dungeon Divers section here on the left hand side, and that will just kind of summarize how many coins you're going to get per run or per energy depending on the stage that you like to farm, normal mode up and through hard mode. And then of course if you're running the campaign like I will be doing, then you'll get some credit for Dungeon Divers as well. But like we discussed, the predominant source of points points is going to be the summon rush aspect highlighted here. So we have each of the different shard types and their respective amounts that you would need to get each of the milestones. So for example, the legendary tome, which is on par with what you'd normally expect in a just regular summon rush on the weekend, you would have it would cost you 7 sacreds, which would be roughly 3,500 points or equivalent in a summon rush. So that's on par with where a legendary tome is typically. The mythical tome would be 11 sacreds. Getting the mythical fragments, all 100 of those, would be 13. Getting the champion is basically on par with what we'd expect for a guaranteed event that requires shards, that is. So 20 sacreds to get the champion, and the soul, of course, we highlighted is a little bit cheaper, so it'd be 18 sacreds to get the soul by itself. Now, of course, all of these values in terms of sacreds are just if you wanted to go exclusively for one of or each of these rewards. If you started to mix and match, it's going to be more or less depending on what you're trying to go for, and I leave that up to you to do the math on combinations of these if that is something that you seek. Of course, some things are closer to others, like the mythical tomes are right near the mythical fragments, so you might want to mix and match those just because of proximity, etc. By far, though, which I'm not highlighting here, the most expensive combination would be trying to get the champion and the 6-star or 5-star perfect soul, because you'd have to go both down the left hand and the right hand side to get both of the keys, and then come down the left hand and the right hand side of the center. So that would be well over like 100,000 something points, and that's a ridiculous amount of sacreds that I don't really think most people are going to have access to or really want to spend on this, because he's a decent champion, but I don't think he's amazing and worth like 30 something sacreds in order to get the champion plus his soul. So what is my plan for this hero's path? Obviously, I am severely biased towards wanting to get the champion, because of course I do want a poison exploder on my account finally, and I have access to it, and so I'm definitely going to be going for this no matter what. And really the decision that I have to make is, when do I want to pull my shards? I have a couple of options. My default approach would be that I would wait until the last day, because that would allow me to get the maximum amount of credit for dungeon divers over the course of the next 3 and some change days, and thus I could potentially reduce the amount of sacreds required to do this by some amount. Obviously, as we highlighted earlier, dungeon divers are really realistically not going to give me a ton of credit, so I at best maybe it would reduce it by 1 sacred or so. It's not going to do anything substantial, at least I don't expect it to, but we'll see. But again, that would be my default setting. The other concept or ideas are kind of taking advantage of the fact that there are some progressive chance events going on over the course of the next 4 days. So there's I guess it's split in half. There's a separate event for the first 2 days and then a separate event for the latter 2 days. And kind of my problem with it is that overall the champions are just kind of underwhelming. It's not that they're bad per se, but a lot of them are like fusions or champions that I already have, so I'm not really compelled to go for it. For example, here on the first set of champions, I have Mountain King, I have Tholan, of course he was a fusion, I have Thor, he was also a fusion. I don't have Quilcha and I don't have Cheshire Cat, and between these two I think Cheshire Cat would be the most desirable option, but again I'm kind of weighing that against potentially just pulling 1 or 2 less sacreds depending on how my Dungeon Divers credit goes, and thus I would really prefer to save as many shards as possible and pull the least amount as possible. And Cheshire Cat would be a nice to have, but not necessarily someone I really want to have. And of course we can't see the second selection, but I have literally every legendary on the second offering of champions that will be live in a couple of days. So I think it's like Pythion and Korra, and a couple of other champions, but all of which that I happen to have. So any of them would be a duplicate, which is just not as useful. They could be helpful, in fairness. If we come over to like my faction guardians, like getting a duplicate Pythion would max out my lizardmen for faction guardians. Getting a duplicate, I think Artak was in there. Artak would help out the orcs. Stock the Broken would start getting duplicates for the Ogre tribe, stuff like that. So again, like they could be useful, picking one of them. But honestly, my kind of going in plan is like I said initially, is just to go, pull on the last day to try and maximize the amount of credit, free credit, air quotes, I can get from Dungeon Divers. And honestly, I'm considering just not picking a champion. You're not forced to pick someone for the progressive chance events. And some of the epics would be nice to get duplicates of on the second day or the second set of champions. But the legendaries, like I said, I have all of them. And honestly, I'd rather get someone from my primary wish list versus getting someone a duplicate of someone that I already have. So that's kind of where I'm thinking, but let me know in the comment section down below if you were in my position. What would you do? Would you YOLO it and try to hope for the Cheshire Cat on the first couple of days, or would you just wait till the second day, go for a duplicate legendary, potentially progressive chance events, or third option, which is what I plan to do, at least at the time of this recording, which is just to pick no one and just wait until the last day anyways. In terms of a formal recommendation for you guys as a free-to-play endgame player, I think this really depends upon what you have the resources to do and what you might want from this path. You know, again, if you want to go for a legendary tome, it's not the worst thing in the world. If you're more super endgame, you need mythical tomes, this is not a bad deal either. Or honestly, I think it's a really, really good value to just go for the mythical fragments. I think that's kind of the best bang for your buck overall in terms of what you might not be able to get later in the future. Obviously, mythical tomes are hard to get. Legendary tomes can be relatively hard to get, and getting mythical fragments for a limited time event, such as these ongoing event dungeon and whatnot, could be a lot more worth your while just because of the odds of getting something really, really good from mythical fragments. You know, you can get your first mythical relic, you can get a much higher chance for a legendary relic, and it could really pay out or turn out really, really well for you. But again, that all boils down to what resources you have at your disposal and what you're willing to spend on or towards any of these rewards. Again, in terms of the champion, I'm heavily biased towards going for him, but I don't think he's actually going to be that useful for majority of the player base, to be honest with you. So in a nutshell, determine what rewards you want, if any at all. Determine how much it's going to cost in terms of your resources. Probably try to do as much dungeon divers as possible prior, again, just to reduce the amount of cost in terms of shards. But also, you know, what I talked about here is mostly in terms of sacred shards, but you are free to definitely pull other types of shards. You could pull primals, although I don't really recommend it. You could pull voids, particularly if you're fresh off of mercy or pretty far away from mercy. Pulling voids during a non-2x could just, you know, build up towards mercy, but also get you a decent amount of points. Or you can just get lucky and try for one of the progress chance events. We didn't really talk about the void champions up for grabs, but you know, it's up to you what you want to do, what you want from the path, and what you're willing to spend to get what you want from the path. But at least the good thing is you're not really dependent on the RNG of what comes out of the shards in order to get your rewards. It just depends on how many shards you will pull of whichever type that will get you a certain amount of points to get your reward. So yeah, that's going to do it for the free-to-play review of the Path of the Lost. Let me know in the comment section down below what your plan is for this hero's path. Do you plan to go for legendary tome, mythical fragments, champion, soul, whatever you're going for? Let me know all of that in the comment section down below. As always, if you did find this video helpful, be sure to hit that like button down below. It really does help out the channel. And also feel free to hit the subscribe button down below as well if you are enjoying the content overall on this channel. I am hoping to try and hit 2,000 subs by the end of the year. We've got plenty of time, 5 or 6 months or so to go. But yeah, we're sitting somewhere around 1,850-ish, and I would love to hit 2K by the end of 2025. So if you, again, are enjoying the content overall on this channel, then feel free to hit the subscribe button down below. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.